Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Maryland Public Service Commission, case number 9449. Before we take up our testimony from our last witness on our schedule, is there any housekeeping we need to deal with?
We do have a bench data response that we have filed yesterday and has been distributed.
All right, why don't we go ahead and mark that as a commission exhibit. Number 19. This is the bench data request from Commissioner Richard, correct?
Correct.
All right. This is Commission Exhibit 19. Any objections to this coming in? If not, 19 is admitted. All right. Mr. Cleaver, why don't we go ahead and stipulate Mr. Mann's testimony and get it in.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you, Your Honor. OPC would ask that the direct testimony of Howard Mann be marked as OPC Exhibit 39. And for the record, that testimony was filed on January 29th, 2018. It consists of 61 pages of narrative testimony and one exhibit, which is Dr. Mann's resume. Also, Your Honor, I have before me OPC's response to the joint applicant's data request set 16. And what this is the applicants, after presenting the response to bench data request number 1, dated February 8th to the Commission last week, the applicants propounded 2 questions to Dr. Mann, asking him whether he agreed with the revisions that the applicants had proposed, asked whether they resolved his concerns, and if not, to please explain to what extent they do not resolve his concerns and his reasoning for same. And we timely served a response to that question, as well as a second question that asks whether Dr. Mann considered the parties' domestic legal rights in drafting his recommendations. If the Commission is inclined to accept what I think has been marked as Commission Exhibit 18, the applicant's response to settlement hearing bench data request number 1 of February 8th, OPC would also ask that the Commission accept OPC's responses to these questions, where the applicants asked Dr. Mann what his position was with respect to what applicants say in this response. And
all right, so you, Mr. Cleaver, this handout, these DRs are then conditioned on the Commission's ruling on Exhibit 18. Is that what you're telling me? Or do you want to?
Yes, Your Honor. I would say that if the Commission doesn't accept Commission Exhibit 18 into the evidentiary record, then I would, at that point, withdraw my request to offer this response responding to that response.
All right, why don't we do this? We'll just mark it now as OPC 40.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I do have the copies available.
I don't want to get, excuse
Sure.
me, Mr. Chair. What I handed out, I think, is going to be applicants' exhibit. What they handed. So I don't want you all to get confused. I think what Mr. Cleaver's talking about is slightly different. They hadn't handed out yet.
That is correct, what Mr. Collins just said, Your Honor. I do have copies.
Oh, you have not handed that out. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was.
Both associated
Yeah, these are.
doctors.
Yeah, gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you for the
It was,
the clarification. All right, we will not mark that. Why don't we do this, Mr. Cleaver? You can remind me, but we'll go ahead and you can go ahead and offer that after we rule on both the motion to accept the rebuttal testimony of Ms. Menaker as well as Exhibit 18. Okay.
thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Okay, any objections to OPC 39? Mr. Mann's post-settlement direct testimony coming in. If not, OPC 39 is admitted. All right, next I want to take up the applicant's motion to accept out of time the post-settlement rebuttal testimony of Ms. Menaker. So, first I'll ask applicants if you want to make any comments before we see if there are any objections.
Sure, very, very briefly, Your Honor. This is this goes to a couple of things. OPC did provide what was nominally reply testimony related to some of the commitments that was also a vehicle for providing, through Dr. Mann, broader testimony that's all legal in nature. Obviously, we, early in the proceedings, made objections regarding legal testimony, and while the principle stands under the circumstances where Dr. Mann's testimony was largely responding to Ms. Menaker's DC testimony. The purpose of Ms. Menaker's rebuttal testimony here was simply to, one, provide that testimony that Dr. Mann discussed but did not provide, and two, to comment very briefly on the additional commitments that the applicants had made in response to Dr. Mann's testimony and dialogue during the first couple days of the evidentiary hearing last week. That's the basis for providing the testimony. We have checked with the parties. None of the parties have objected to that testimony. I think there were a couple who may not have ever responded, but they're not here today either. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me check with the parties myself to see if there are any objections to Andrea Menaker's post-settlement rebuttal testimony dated February the 12th, 2018, coming into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. All right, then it's before us now. Let me start, Mr. Du Bois, by saying that my inclination is to allow this testimony to come into evidence to complete the record, because I think it would serve us well to have the record completed on this NAFTA issue. Having said that, I'm concerned about the lateness by which this testimony is being presented to us. I mean, in my view, this testimony could have been presented as direct testimony in early January. It could have been presented as a rejoinder testimony after Mr. Mann's testimony was filed, and I think it's really in poor form to have it come in as late as it did, given that this testimony was prepared back in the fall for the D.C. Commission and could have easily been presented to us. Having said that, I'm still inclined to let it in, but I'll ask my fellow commissioners if they want to make some comments. We'll start with Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I have some serious concerns with the admission of this testimony. Procedurally, it's been attempted to had this put in several times without success, and so now we're trying another route. I would note that this issue was before the Commission because Mr. Mann filed pre-filed testimony. There were 8 days in which the joint applicants could have prepared what are effectively 2 pages of substantive testimony with an exhibit attached. There was no notice that I'm aware of that was provided that prior to Monday that this was going to be filed, and I have some serious concerns with the precedent that this might set, and I wanted to make sure that the parties heard and that I was on the record that, I have grave concerns with this very, very late filing. And I would also note that this is in fact 4 pages of testimony, of which again 2 are substantive, and that the attachment is in fact an attachment. It is not testimony in this case. So I just like to make sure that the parties are aware and that, this commission will give it the weight that it believes is appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to affiliate myself with the comments of the chairman and Commissioner Herman and further say that I'm concerned about the inviolability of our procedural rules. We set out a schedule. The reason we set out a schedule is so that we have some order in our proceedings, and these late filings are a challenge to that. And so I'm in favor of transparency and I'm in favor of completing the record, but I'm not in favor of doing that at the expense of violating our procedural schedule. And that is very, very concerning to me. I agree strongly that this should not be considered precedential in any way, shape, or form, because we don't want parties coming to us in the future saying, well, you did it here, why can't you do it for us? Because this is not the norm, and it's not expected, and quite honestly, I'm not excited to have this presented to us in this manner. As you can see with other filings that have to occur, it causes, in my mind, some confusion late in the process. And I'm not happy about that, although I will support bringing this testimony in with reservation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Richard?
Sure. I think it's already been stated very, very well. And as a non-lawyer, the distinction to the fact that we're not a court, we are an administrative body is important to me. It does give us some latitude in as we approach procedure and evidentiary process. However, it is important to me that we have a very fair and orderly proceeding, and it's important that our final decision is supported and can be defended by our attorneys. So I also just wanted to say I think this testimony seems unreasonably out of time. This was an issue presented very early on, so I'm disappointed the way it's been presented, but I do intend to support stipulating since no parties are objecting, and that's my statement. I also want to align with Commissioner O'Donnell. I don't consider this to be a precedent at all in this decision. So, I think this is at least a one-time consideration for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I would have actually opposed admitting this testimony at this late date if any of the other parties had objected. Since everybody was okay with admitting it, I won't say I'm comfortable admitting it at this point, especially the exhibit that really is just DC testimony that was already available to us in this proceeding through comment, but it's not even focused on our proceeding or our statute, so it doesn't give us a lot of direct guidance as to how we can, what we can get from it. So it creates a bit of a procedural issue for us going forward. But if there aren't any parties that are opposed to it, then I guess it's okay to let it in for purposes of completing the record. But I do agree that there's no precedent or procedural history value to this beyond this particular act, in this case, beyond the fact that we're doing it this one time.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Linton. All right, so with those concerns noted, applicant 79, Ms. Maniker's post-settlement rebuttal testimony is admitted. Next, I want to go to Commission Exhibit 18, which also includes Ms. Maniker's testimony as part of that. So this is the Commission's ruling on Commission Exhibit 18. It certainly in our view goes beyond the question of OPC's two proposed conditions for NAFTA. So I can direct everyone's attention to page 2. What the Commission is going to do is accept page 1 of Commission 18 through page 2, second full paragraph, which ends the legal rights when they acquired other Maryland utilities. So we will not admit into evidence, starting with the last sentence of the second full paragraph. Those 4 issues are discussed in greater detail below in items 1, 2, and 4 covered in the comments filed by Ms. Menaker. That will not be admitted to evidence with the exception of Attachment A, which can be admitted. Attachment B will not be admitted. So with that, Commission, with those changes, Commission Exhibit 18, or those modifications, Commission Exhibit 18 is admitted. All right, next let's go to the handout that we received from the applicants, which are DR sponsored by Dr. Mann.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Du Bois.
This is something I think we would like to have marked as applicants exhibit, I think we're on 79.
80.
Oh, 80, thank you. This is a series of data responses from Dr. Mann to joint applicants requests 14-4, -5, -6, -7, -8, -10, -15, and -17, and set 15, -4, -8, and -9. Part of our agreement with stipulating in Dr. Mann's testimony had been also stipulating in these data responses that were sponsored by Dr. Mann.
All right, very good. Any objections?
Mr. Du Bois is correct. We agreed to that, so no objection.
Thank you. Applicant 80 is admitted. Mr. Cleaver, that brings us back to your ERD.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So in light of the Commission's partial admission of what was marked as Commission Exhibit 18, OPC would request that this exhibit be marked and then moved into evidence. May I approach with the exhibit,
You may.
Your Honor? Thank you. Your Honor, I've handed out OPC's responses to 2 data requests from the applicants timely served yesterday, February 14th, 2018. The responses are the responses to joint applicants data requests 16-1 and 16-2, and there is also an attachment which contains revised draft language where Dr. Mann attempted to incorporate some of the criticism or critique that the applicants leveled at his recommendations to account for some of those. He agrees with some of the applicants' analysis of his recommendations. Other parts of the analysis he does not agree with. I would ask that this be marked as OPC Exhibit 40. In light of the fact that this was a question that was propounded to OPC but promulgated to everyone on the service list in this case, and that OPC timely provided a response that was also served on everyone in this case, and that the applicants took the affirmative step of asking a witness whose testimony is stipulated into the record we made these, we proposed these changes to what you've done. What do you think of it? Our position is that this should be admitted into the evidentiary record.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Any objections?
If I may, no objection, but with an explanation. I can say both as on behalf of the companies and as counsel, we are sensitive to the comments the Commission has made with respect to the bench data response and Ms. Mineker's testimony, and do apologize for the way we handled that, the way that happened. Under the circumstances, I think we certainly would not be in a position where we'd be objecting to People's Counsel seeking to put this in. It does also have the effect of helping to ensure that not only did the parties at least have Ms. Mineker's testimony in those materials, but they were able to actually respond to it and have the last word on it.
All right, thank you. With that, OPC 40 is admitted.
Thank you. And Your Honor, I don't recall, I don't believe I ever actually moved for the admission of OPC 39, but maybe the Commission just...
Yeah, I think I
okay.
brought it in.
Thank you,
You
Your
may
Honor.
not have moved.
Thank you.
Yep. I think we have all our now. I don't think there are any outstanding exhibits on hold. And Ms. Cleaver, we also have your February 12th letter to the Commission correcting. I believe it's correcting your initial brief. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's noted as well.
Thank you very much, Your
Yeah.
Honor.
All right, I think that's all I have. Any other housekeeping before we adjourn? Okay, if not, briefs are due March 1st. I look forward to getting everyone's briefs. I want to thank everyone for your cooperation and both last week and as well as this week. Appreciate that. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.